Hello class and welcome to MSc 402 Project Management. My name's Dale Dierdorf. I'm your instructor, coach, and facilitator for the sessions we've got lined up for you. This is going to be a Module 2 course lecture, and it's based on the project initiating phase. We're going to talk about all the components necessary when we get into that second phase of that Pracademic project management model. And we've covered in last module all of the components necessary to get you to the official project initiating phase. The project initiating phase is where we actually anoint the project manager, we name them, and we put together the team charter. That person's name should be included in the team charter. So the four elements that I show below, the initiating the project, the identifying stakeholders, the scope statement, and the team charter, all of these are the elements that we're going to discuss. So let's go ahead and jump in and get what I'll call a good grounding of this perspective of the initiating process group and where we can find that in relation to not only the Pracademic information that I'm giving you, but in the the PMI PMBOK information. So if you jump into your PMBOK, the new PMBOK, and you go to page 8, you're going to see this section on stakeholder performance, the domain. Okay, so this is one of the domains. It is one of the key ones that you're going to be using in the initiating process group. And in that domain, we start talking about the stakeholders, internal, external, all of those pieces. So this is going to be based upon how we engage those. So you can see in that Pracademic project management perspective over here, the initiating phase is the second one down. That's the one we're moving through. We finished the introduction phase. Next will become the planning phase. So this sets the stage. It sets us up for moving into that planning stage. So the initiating process group consists of those processes performed to define the initial project scope and obtain authorization to start the project. The initial financial resources are committed along with identification of internal and external stakeholders who influence the overall outcome of the project. So that sets the groundwork for what we're going to talk about, the components to it. So remember that every project is unique in its objectives as well as its challenges. You know, it's easy to say that we want to improve the way projects are managed, but the only way to do that is to really understand that there are phases in a project. And if we break them into phases, it makes us easier for the team to evaluate and, if necessary, correct the course of the scope of the project, sometimes even pivoting away from the original plan. We may have to modify the quality. It may mean that we have to go back to the contract and we may have to add or remove elements from the contract. But remember, the initiating phase can mean different things to different organizations. A simple way to separate it from the rest of the project life cycle is that it's everything that occurs before a project is approved. All of that begins as soon as we get into the initiating phase. Typically, the initiating phase is where the project sponsor, in tandem with the project manager, clarifies three major objectives. Those are going to be the scope constraints, the project's objectives, and then ultimately melding that into the project charter. Before the complete project planning phase begins, stakeholders approve this charter and then timelines and budgets are laid out in more detail. That planning that we're going to be going into in the next phase is ready to begin once we're completed with this. So when we talk about the project initiating phase, there's this great graphic over here because we talked about different things meaning different, to different people, one thing means one thing. To another group, it may mean something else. This kind of illustrates, a good representation of how the customer explained it, how the project leader understood it, how the analysis designed it, how the programmer wrote it, how the business consultant described it, how the project was documented, what operations were installed, how the customer was billed, how it was supported, and what the customer really needed. So if you really look at that flow of these 10 different visual images, it's humorous, But there are so many times that you get to the finish line and what the customer really needed or really wanted had very little to do with what they actually received, because we have preconceived ideas. We start thinking about things a certain way, and we typically build things in the pattern that we've done them previously. This is how we've done it before. This must be how they want it done now. So remember, ideally, if an objective is clear, you can show it to 5 different people who, after reviewing it, hold a single view about its meaning. What does it really mean? So that's ultimately a great test for you. Now, the project charter is one of the components that you're going to be working on this week in this module, and we want to make sure you really understand that. We get you a good grounding perspective on how to put together a great charter. Now, we're giving you a template, so you've got a template on what to fill out, but I want to walk you through the components of it. The project charter also is, many times the first official document that's created for a given project. This is where an idea is translated into tangible words that illustrate the backbone of that project. It provides a preliminary documentation of the roles, responsibilities, assumptions, perceptions, outlines the project objectives, identifies the key stakeholders, both internally and externally, and provides the authority to the project manager. It serves as an agreed upon reference of authority for the duration of the project, and the terms of reference are typically part of the project charter. Now, there are a few things every professional project charter needs to have inside it, and we're going to walk you through the next 4 slides of exactly what that is. So you can see within your course project for ECS, we have identified for you a project charter template, and I will be asking you to fill out that bare bones information. Once you've got that done, it sets the stage for you to then start working on the scope statement. You're going to find that the project charter has the preliminary information necessary for you to then create the scope statement. It may have redundant information as you continue to move forward. You may say, oh, well, that was explained in the project charter. It may have been, but it may need to be elaborated in more detail when we get into the project scope. So for the project title, the title of the project should be unique so it doesn't get confused with other project titles. You can select something emblematic of the project or something more mysterious. It's up to you. You call the project whatever you want, okay? Each team, each group will have a unique project that they are working on. You're determining which one that is. You've selected the project that you want to work on, and I need you to go ahead and fill out that information. Give me the project name, the project team name, okay? Which could be, team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4, team 5, depending on what it is. The owners, that would be all of the team members. The project number, for you, it's probably going to be project number 1. The prioritization for you, you determine that. Is it immediate? Is it, long-term, short-term? We want a start date and a scheduled completion date. I need to have those 2 components. Then we're going to go ahead and put in the project description, the mission, and the purpose. In this section, I need you to elaborate. What is the purpose of the project? What is our mission? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish for our stakeholders? Which of their requirements are we trying to fulfill? You're going to put that in section 2. Go ahead and delete the information that's in there from a template standpoint. You'll see that I've given you specific examples in each one of these cells also that can be stripped out so that you've got a clean project. Then we're going to go into the section 3, which is our project description. Now, our project description is what do we want to do with this project? What will this project produce? What will it accomplish? Is there a final project? If so, what does that look like? And this statement may be an articulation or a sub-statement of the last statement you made, but it will give you additional information. Now, number 4 is going to be the business case. This is why are our stakeholders going to approve this project? Will we gain money from it? Will we lose money from it? Is there a regulation in place that requires that this project be in compliance with something? ASQ 9100, ISO 9000, CMMI, FDA, pharma type of, certifications, things like that. So Make sure you research it to understand that. Now, the fifth area we're going to go into is going to be the project manager authority level. And that's going to be who will be our project manager for this project. For this one, we're going to anoint your Module 2 or your Week 2 team leader for your group. Put them in as the project manager. That will suffice. We need to know how much authority will they have, which means that you need to identify that they are only in authority this week. Next week, there will be another project manager. Who will that be? And that you're rotating the team lead. Make sure you accomplish that by writing this. Will the company be sponsoring the project? How much money will they have in the budget? Those are pieces of information that were given to you out of the proposal. So you've got a proposal, you're going to decompose that, and you need to make sure that you identify, are there other assets that will be available to you? Number 6 is going to be the key stakeholders. Who are the key people in the project manager that have to work with to complete this project? So you know it's going to be all of you. You know it's going to be me as a representation from the PMO, and then any additional people that you start to see, you want to go ahead and put their names in there. And then next is going to be the objectives. Number 7 is the objectives. What result will we need to obtain in order to verify that the project was completed? What services will be performed? What resources will be acquired? What other objectives will we need to attain in order to be successful? Now, once we jump into that, we're then going to fill in number 8. I need you to lay out initial milestones. There's usually a start milestone at the beginning of a project and an end milestone. You begin a project, you end the project, and then all of the stair-stepping pieces through that. From a milestone standpoint, in any project, there's significant events in the project. They will help us stay on track and are important to communicating with our stakeholders so they will know whether to expect or understand if the project is on track or not. When can we expect the hardware to be in place? Do the wires work when the computer's already in the building? Those are examples of statements that you could understand how we determine what a milestone would be. Now, number 9 is going to be the success criteria and high-level requirements. Must have, shall have statements are always requirements that have to be flowed down and demonstrated through one of 4 methods in order for you to sell a project off. So remember that. Which stakeholder requirements must the project meet? Identify all of those that you can think of. Then the budget. What's your initial budget for the project? Is it flexible or is it a budget that is not to be exceeded? Decompose that information out of the proposal. If necessary and you need more information, you can always send the PMO for ECS a message, and that would float through to me. I will, as the representational person for ECS from a PMO standpoint, I can answer those questions for you. The next thing is going to be resources pre-assigned. Are there any resources that are already available for this project? You know that all of you would fall into that category. Who else? What other resources do you anticipate are going to be there? Take a peek at the ECS PMO as far as the structure of it. Are there other areas that you think are going to be available for you? The next thing is going to be the high-level risks. Identify at this point what you can see are the known knowns. These are going to be high-level risks. The unknown unknowns are not going to be available to you right now. You don't know what you don't know, but anticipate. Go look at previous projects that followed down this track. What were their high-level risks? Simple Google searches, go off and look at other companies that are doing the same type of work you're doing. Come up with some information there. The next piece is going to be number 13, the approval requirements. Who is required to approve this project? Who has ownership of the success or failure? Who will sign off on it? Those are all names that you can create. And if you want to put my name in there for all of those, I understand that. You can have your team members' names. You can have somebody else. So don't forget, all of these cells need to be completed. And then the last area here is going to be the high-level assumptions and constraints. We need to understand what assumptions and constraints there are that haven't previously been considered. Are we making assumptions about this project? What are we taking for granted? Is there something that most certainly will or will not happen in this project? And then are there other external limits that will constrain our choices? Now, those are all the pieces that you need for that point. Now, once that document is completed, make sure you submit it. The team leader would be the one that submits it for the team. I will grade it for you as quickly as possible. Each one of those cells has a potential to provide you not only additional information on where your team is going, but it gives you a good feel for what you should be laying out for your scope. The project scope is the part of the project planning that involves determining and documenting a list of specific project goals, the deliverables, features, functions, tasks, deadlines, and ultimately costs. In other words, it's what's needed to achieve the work. It's what you have to do to deliver it. To define a project scope, you must first identify the following things. Number one, the project objectives, the goals, the sub-phases if there are any, tasks that must be included and or subtasks, resources, budget, and schedule. Now, when you go to start creating a scope statement, the scope statement for a project should address the customer or stakeholder specific needs and requirements and showcase how they're going to be fulfilled through the project. And you may need to be with a group or a company that's going to perform the work of the project, including external and internal stakeholders, to create that information correctly. There might be contractors hired to work with the group, and there might be an external firm that your company is hiring to perform some of the work. The customer might even be part of the internal department within the organization that's going to be working on this scope statement. So remember that the scope is still focused on meeting the customer's requirements, and an effective scope statement will help guide a project to completion and minimize any of what we refer to as scope creep. Scope creep is one of the things that causes us typically to overrun the cost on a project and to extend the schedule beyond the anticipated delivery time. Scope creep is something we want to try to eliminate if possible. If it does come in and we do get additional scope, we do need to understand at what point do we draw a line in the sand and say, hey, that's beyond the scope that we currently had. What we need to do is we need to either get additional, a rebaseline, and we go ahead and eat the scope creep, but we float it into our baseline plan, or we may need to go back to contracts and tell contracts, you need to add this in as a new requirement. I need funding, and I need a schedule relief so that I can accommodate this. So remember that the purpose of the scope is to define what deliverables are required by the customer and or the stakeholders. These definitions should be clear, concise, definitive, and quantitative, not qualitative. You can have qualitative ones, but they've got to also have a quantitative element, or else it's impossible to be able to prove that we delivered it. The scope will lay out the work results, the outputs, and everything that's going to be produced in the course project. Now, let's keep going. Let's keep talking about this scope statement. You're going to take all of the documentation that you've got up to this point, and it's going to be integrated into that scope statement. That's part of what the scope statement is. To be practical, the scope statement is generally created with the input of multiple team members. You want everyone to give you what they think it should be. So in your team meetings, talk about that. What exactly are we delivering? Is it, analysis in addition to hardware? Is it, a prototype in addition to a demonstration? What does it mean to you? So when creating a scope statement, it's important to remember that it is probably and arguably the most important single document that's going to be created in the project. And without a meticulous scope statement, micromanaged, push at it from all edges and say, is there a way that this should be changed, or do we think we've got something solid? It will be very difficult to successfully complete a project without that. The better your scope statement is, the better your chances for success. And in the following slides, we're going to describe each section that one should expect to see in the practitioner-based scope statement. Now, you'll see that we have provided you a template also for the scope statement. This actually gives you all of the pieces that you would need to fill out in a scope statement. You're going to say, this has a lot of sections that seem to be repeated from the project charter. That's possible. Some of that information is going to come over into the scope statement and is going to get elaborated on. Over here, this is where we actually put the fine pencil line on it and say, it can be done. This is how we're going to do it, yea, verily. So don't forget that, it's usually based on information that was found in the project charter and the proposal, and it usually begins by overviewing the project. So the first thing is going to be the deliverables. Number one, what services or tangible products will be created for this project? They're generally big picture items, but they can also be small side projects. So if my project was to was to wire a building for Wi-Fi, the cables, the boxes, the routers might be examples of those deliverables. Now, the next phase we're going to go into, the next thing we want to think about are the project objectives. Project objectives are measurable statements that include and indicate the goals of your project. They include any quality, any cost, any schedule, and any scope elements that you can think of. Make sure you capture all of that in this area. The next piece are going to be the project assumptions. Now, we talked about project assumptions previously. Now that we've got more granularity, now that we've got more detail, we really need to understand that project assumptions are the aspects of the project that we can assume are true without any external proof of the purposes, from a planning perspective. So with our Wi-Fi installation, we can assume that the building will have electricity. Okay? Now we're going to talk about the project constraints. Project constraints are limitations placed upon the project. Generally, these constraints are placed by individuals outside of the project. They might be the laws, the rules, the procedures, the policies, or other customer requirements that are flowed to you. If you were given a budget of $20,000 to complete that Wi-Fi project, then it is going to be a constraint for the project, since we will not be given any more money to complete that project. ECS has also given you a set amount of money. So remember that. Exclusions are aspects of the project not contained within. So you got to make sure that if you think you're defining any exclusions, you want to make sure to capture those. So in our Wi-Fi example, the way the end user uses their internet connection isn't included. Monitoring and controlling the way the users use the internet might be the responsibility of a systems administrator. This is an exclusion that sets a boundary for the project manager to work within. Now, we've got a project acceptance criteria. You're going to define what that is. What did we have to satisfy to create, a successful project? You've got the technical requirements, and you'll find that the technical requirements give you a variety of elements here where you can identify anything that you need. You're going to notice that the milestones have not been included in this list from the practitioner's point of view, but the milestones should be found within the project charter, not the scope statement. Okay? Now, finally, let's just talk about this initiating closing piece of it for the scope statement. Many times it's necessary to put together a checklist. That checklist may simply look at the project charter or the project plan as the steps you're filling in the template, the basic information. It's very valuable for you to understand that if you've delegated elements of this off to other people, you can put their names next to any of these on the checklist, and that way they can verify that yes, they have reviewed the document and yes, it contains the information that they need. During the initiation phase, the scope will be discussed and its points negotiated until all of your major stakeholders, internal and external, see that their objectives are being met. The final scope is then documented within the project charter and signed off by major stakeholders. So remember that this is an iterative document. Once you've got this scope statement created, it also feeds back into that project charter. Now, that's what I've got lined up for you on this particular lecture for Module 2. It's on the initiating phase. Future lectures will be on each one of the phases that we continue to go through. So if you run into any problems or issues, feel free to reach out to me at any time. And I look forward to hearing your comments in our live lectures and our live debates. Have a great one. Bye-bye.